Well, welcome back. We're now going to talk to Senator James Paterson, who's an up-and-coming Liberal senator from Victoria, one of the bright ones. So, James, good to see you again. James,
thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Let me start by asking you this. The Senate in the next 2 weeks is going to be a place of great excitement. There's about 6 bills, I think, that are going to come forward. Tell us, how do you think the ABCC bill will go? Will it get through? And what about the other bills? What's the chance of the government getting its legislation through before Christmas?
Well, Peter, the Senate is always a place of excitement. I have to pick you up on that. But yes, it's true that this coming 2 weeks, it will be, I think, particularly exciting and quite a bit of focus. The truth is the House has done their fair share of the heavy lifting so far this year since we've returned after the election. They've passed a lot of the key bills and it's now up to the Senate to pass them. I'm very hopeful that we'll pass a reasonable proportion of those that are up before the Senate before the end of the year, because some of them have a time-sensitive nature to them. You asked about the IR bills in particular. The Registered Organisations Commission is being debated as we speak in the Parliament, in the Senate. I spoke on the bill this morning. I'm very hopeful that that will pass, and it would be terrific if it was in a timely way, even by the end of this week. But the crossbench is the crossbench, and they will make up their mind in their own time, and we can't force that as a government. So we're a little bit at their disposal.
Well, seeing as you've been talking to on the Rock, so what's happening with the fella from Western Australia, who I think's been in front of the High Court or in the...
He was in the High Court today.
Lost today, was it? Did he? Yeah, I haven't heard. Tell us about that. And Bob Day, what's happening with them and how's that impacting on the numbers?
So the Senate has referred the matters of both Senator Day and Senator Culleton to the High Court. Yep. The High Court is sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns, which it does after an election, to resolve any disputes about eligibility, for example. There were hearings today, and I believe Senator Culleton's motion today before the High Court was about the timing of the hearing, and I believe he was trying to delay it, and I understand he wasn't successful in that.
He wasn't, no.
But nonetheless, it will still take, I believe, until early next year before they're able to make a decision about that. So that's raised questions about 2 senators. Senator Day has already resigned, so he's not there and not voting. Senator Culleton has received advice that he's entitled to continue to vote until his eligibility is resolved. So he has been here today, and I expect he'll be here for the rest of the week, and he will be voting.
What about the sorry, Peter? What about the replacement for Family First in South Australia? Is that going ahead?
Well, that will depend on the outcome of the Court of Disputed Returns decision.
Oh, I see.
If it is just a normal casual vacancy, because Senator Day has resigned, then it's up to Family First to choose his replacement. If it is found that Senator Day was ineligible to stand in the first place, there are a couple of potential options, which may be that his running mate, who was nominated number 2, is elected, but it may also be that another Senate candidate who stood is elected. It's not clear. It would depend on the way the High Court decided.
Yep.
So what do you think about the Rock then? Because it hasn't that much discussion as the ABCC, but so you've been talking about it today. What would you say are the 2 or 3 sort of significant issues really that are part and parcel of that legislation?
Well, the interesting thing about the debate in the Senate that I listened to this morning is that most of the senators speaking against the Registered Organisations Commission, including both the Labor senators and also the Green senators, actually spent almost no time at all talking about the Registered Organisations Commission. They delivered general speeches that were more about unions generally and the work that they do, and trying to paint this as an attack on unions. I don't think that's fair. I think this is oversight for union officials, because union members have been seriously ripped off in a pretty spectacular and obvious way.
Yeah. James, maybe we should actually explain, this is Peter Reith's normal question, so what does the legislation actually do? Just explain to our viewers what this legislation is all about. What will it mean if it's passed?
So it's seeking to establish for the first time a Registered Organisations Commission. Currently there's no dedicated regulator of both unions and employer associations. Now these are big and plentiful organisations. There's 63 employer organisations and something in the vicinity of 50 odd unions, and together they have about $1.5 billion of revenue each year, $2.5 billion of assets. They have tax exempt status, and the unions in particular have special legal rights, such as, say, the right to entry to a workplace. So at the moment, they have no special regulator. The Fair Work Commission regulates them in a sense, but not in a dedicated way. This would establish one that is on par with, say, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission and the way in which it regulates corporations. And it would establish duties for the union officials and also officials of employer organisations that are similar to the duties that company directors currently have to bear. So it has some disclosure requirements about their decision-making, conflicts of interest, pay, and it also has penalties for contraventions of the law, some civil penalties and also some criminal penalties.
So do you think that it's going to have a real impact? I mean, would you, for example, think that fairly early in the piece they could go back and the new ROC, would they be able to go back and have a look at the ASU, because they've had a lot of problems, as we know. In fact, in some ways they gave birth to these issues in recent times anyway. Do we have any sense of some of these areas that might be picked up and how quickly? And do we know who might be the commissioner? I think there are going to be 4 deputies who would be part-time. When do you think the government might make a decision on who those people would be? Because I think that's absolutely critical. It's one thing to have the legislation, and it's another thing to get the person who can really make this happen.
Yeah, they're 2 very important questions, Peter. I'd say I'm not sure what capacity the organisation, the ROC, will have to go back in the past and look at previous cases. Obviously, there have been many and particularly spectacular cases in the HSU, as you say, but also, as we're speaking, the National Union of Workers, there's a case about them before the courts. There has been with the Australian Workers Union, the Transport Workers Union. So there have been many cases, and I'm not sure how far it can delve into the past, but certainly going forward, I think it will be, ensuring that these kind of cases where union members' funds have been misappropriated and ripped off won't be able to happen again. And on the question of appointments, I'm not aware the government's made any decisions about that. I would be surprised if they had. Obviously, that would be putting the cart before the horse. But you're absolutely right. In many senses, personnel is policy. And if you don't get the people right, then the organisation itself won't be able to fulfil its mission. So it'll be something that's really important, but something that I think we can put a lot of faith in the relevant Minister, Michaelia Cash, to get right.
And do you think, is the government doing enough in terms of the pressures which governments have said that they've done, which is to put real pressure on some of the employers not to give in to some of the shocking behaviour of the CFMEU? And there's been stories of that in the last few days. We had Andrew Lee talking about how wages are down, etc. But of course, they're not that case. That's not the case in the CBD. In fact, the CFMEU are ripping the Australian public off day in, day out, and they are, pushing people around, particularly the subbies, who are an important part of the industry. Are we going to really, stamp down on some of these employers? Because I think some of those employers need to have the harsh hand of government looking after the public interest.
You're right, Peter. I mean, it takes 2 to tango, and it's very disappointing if businesses give in to union pressure and engage in unlawful conduct and unlawful payments. And some of those examples were exposed by the Trade Union Royal Commission, where companies have gone along with these sweetheart deals with unions, where they've appeared to pay money to unions in exchange for, directly to those unions, in exchange for those unions agreeing to more lenient terms in enterprise bargaining agreements. That's appalling, and that should not happen. And part of the reason why we need a dedicated tough cop on the beat like the Registered Organisations Commission is to ensure that that sort of thing doesn't happen in the future. And so I don't want to see businesses doing that, and I don't want to see businesses being forced to do that by militant unions.
James, let me ask the question about this issue about safety, and I'm talking about both the IR bills here. Peter and I have invited the CFMEU to come on and talk about the issue of safety, and I don't know whether it's because of my bad manners or Peter's. I have no idea. They won't come on. We've got an open opportunity for them to come and do that. They argue, of course, that safety is one of the reasons why they need to carry on the way they do and the activities and the industrial activities. How do you guarantee, assuming both these pieces of legislation go through, the ABCC and ROC and so on, how do you look after the safety of workers? Because I don't think anyone, regardless of our political views, wants to see people killed on a work site. None of us do. So how do you see safety being protected on work sites if both these pieces of legislation go through?
I agree, Peter. The building industry does not have anywhere near close to a perfect record on safety, and far too many workers have been injured and even killed on building sites in Australia, and that's of great concern. Unfortunately, I think unions have done workers no favours in the way in which they have totally abused things which were intended for safety, and they've used them for other purposes. So I'll give you one example. There was a court case in recent years where a union official abused his right to access a work site, supposedly for safety. But that union official took with him onto the site an FPOS machine. And obviously the purpose of taking an FPOS machine onto the site is not to check that the site is safe, but it's probably to collect payments from workers on those sites for their union dues, for example. That is one of the ways in which the CFMEU and other unions have abused this. And frankly, when they do so, they're letting down workers because they do have an important role to play in safety. But people are going to be very cynical about those special legal privileges they're given if they're seen to be using them for their own benefit and not for the benefit and safety of workers.
All right, James. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks for your time, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll keep across the issues you've been talking about. Thanks again, James.
Thanks, James.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.